In this lesson, you're going to be learning about Emily Dickinson and her poetry. Few individuals have drawn so much attention to themselves by seeming to do so little as Emily Dickinson. Born on December 10, 1830, in Amherst, a small college town in western Massachusetts, Emily Dickinson spent most of her life doing little more than what was expected of a 19th century unmarried daughter of a rather prominent New England lawyer. With only a little more education than was expected for a woman of her time and few prospects of marriage, she settled into a domestic routine that guaranteed obscurity. While her only brother, Austin, went on to study and practice law, marry, and raise a family, Dickinson and her younger sister Lavina, along with several domestics and hired hands, it should be noted, assumed the responsibilities of managing the household of one of Amherst's most respected families. She traveled outside Amherst only a few times, and in the last years of her life, she never stepped beyond the hedges of the homestead, as the family home was called, and seldom met face to face with people other than her family. During her lifetime, a number of people, including family members, were aware that Dickinson wrote poetry. She even tested the waters at one time by approaching an editor of the Atlantic Monthly magazine, one of the most respected literary magazines of the period, and asking for his assessment of her poetry. "Does it live?" she asked him. No one, however, had been aware of the sustained commitment that, after her death at the age of 56, left behind manuscripts of almost 1,900 poems. Dickinson never actually attempted to publish her poems during her lifetime. Of the handful that were published, most were without her knowledge or consent. Their spelling, punctuation, syntax, capitalization, and meter were altered to reflect the expectations of 19th century readers. After her death, the family discovered the extent of her work and made plans for publication. The first collection was published in 1890, and several others followed intermittently. The complete poems were published in 1955. Dickinson did not edit her poems for publication, and she did not give them titles. They are usually referred to by their first lines. When we read her work, we are really reading her rough drafts, many of which she repeatedly revised. She was what Ralph Waldo Emerson referred to as a portfolio poet, meaning that she always constantly improved her poems. Her poetry differs from other poetry that we have read. It is free verse poetry in its truest form, lacking patterns in rhyme, meter, or stanza. Dickinson does rhyme, however. Her rhymes are close rhymes in many instances. A close rhyme is a rhyme which is not exact. Cat and hat are exact rhymes. A close rhyme example is the words soul and all. Our ears want to find patterns as humans, and rhyme is a pattern. Our ears readily accept soul and all as rhyme. While reading Dickinson's poetry, think of her voice. Is she, like Whitman, speaking as herself, or is the speaker of her poems a character, a fictional person that is completely disconnected from Dickinson, or is it a speaker that has only been influenced by her life? In order to decide this, look at the similarities between her life and her poems. You must also look for Dickinson's tone in her poetry. To find her tone, ask yourself, what is the speaker's attitude towards the subject matter? Many poems have been written about death or, say, spring, but how does Dickinson treat the particular subject of the poem? What words does she choose? How does she use her sentences to describe that topic? So, while reading her poetry in this lesson, keep in mind her strange life and that her poems were never meant to be published. Also, keep in mind how they conform to free verse, her use of close rhyme, her voice, and her tone.